Oh. Okay. So thank you very much, guys. I mean, this room is packed. It's truly impressive. So thank you very much for being here. So we're going to do this session about PBR and how Substance can help you with PBR, of course. So PBR means physically based rendering. So first, one quick question. Who's currently using Substance in this assembly? Okay, cool. So a bunch of people already. That's great. These last 12 months have been a blast, to be honest. Our community has exploded. It's been a pleasure, actually, to see all the feedbacks you guys have provided. So thank you very much for your support, because this is you guys that allows us to innovate as much as we can. And it's just the beginning. Let me tell you that the company has been growing a lot, and we're going to accelerate. So today we're doing texturing. We want to go in other fields as well. But I promise you, there are going to be really cool stuff happening in the next 6 months. So back to PBR. So today we want to give you very practical guidelines on PBR, meaning that Wes here will do a very simple demo on some assets to show you how to do this. Substance is, we like to tell, it's the new generation of texturing. We have a fast-growing community, more than 30,000 active users, from indies to major studios. Originally, we're coming from the AAA gaming industry. This is where we learned about gaming pipeline. This is where we learned about the constraints and how difficult it was to do a game, and especially how the art was constraining all the time. So the whole point was to streamline the texture creation pipeline and make it as fun as possible. So today, we have got more than 120 AAA games using Substance, AAA project. This means that starting now, 50% of all AAA games are actually using Substance extensively in the pipeline. The Substance format is, as you know, natively integrated in Unity. Unity has been a close partner almost since its inception, and we've been working closely together to make a workflow, a PBR workflow that would work as well as possible. We also developed a unique ecosystem of tools and also of content. Today, we're not only going to talk about tools, but also about pre-made content and how you can get PBR materials, how you can get guidelines very easily through a new service that we just launched called Substance Share. So, just to give you an example of a big game using Substance, you heard perhaps about Forza Motorsport 6. All these magnificent materials have been done with Substance. And this is exactly what PBR is all about. Super realistic definition. It doesn't mean it needs to be photorealistic, but the reflection of the light, the way materials are behaving with the light is accurate and candy to the eye. Games using Unity also have been using Substance, like Republic Remastered. When they upgraded their game for desktop, they've been using to actually transition from old school shaders to PBR shaders. So Substance is absolutely not an elite tool set. It's truly something that covers all the needs from indie to AAA. So when we talk about PBR, what is it exactly? So the definition is that it's a new method of shading and rendering that provides a more accurate representation on how light interacts with surfaces. Shortly put, it looks good. PBR was invented actually 2 decades ago. It has been used extensively in film and in CG rendering for quite some time. The concepts have been invented at Disney, and actually the film pipeline have been using it extensively in the last 10 years. It started with games approximately 2 to 3 years ago, as soon as the new console were released, so PS4, Xbox One, and of course on PC. And the main problem was about consistency of assets. And how can we produce 10 times more assets with the same amount of people and make sure it remains consistent? So it's not about it looks better than before in the end. It looks as good as before, but you can produce 10 times, 100 times more content without caring, without being worried about the consistency and how the materials will look like inside the game engine. So PBR, contrary to what you could think, works regardless of the art style. Think Pixar. Pixar is very stylized. This is fully PBR. What is actually nice with Pixar is that when you have roughness on stylized texture, it looks really nice because it reacts realistically, even though it's very stylized. And of course, you can go full photorealistic, but this is a misconception. PBR is not about photorealistic style. It can be anything you want. It's just a new way to produce content that is much more adapted to modern pipeline. So in the end, it provides a workflow for creating assets, for creating consistent artwork, even between different artists. When we talk to, let's say, a big studio, big AAA studio, they've got 200 artists, there is a huge problem about asset management and art direction. And using Substance is actually a great way to ensure that every asset that goes through a Substance will have the right parameters to make it well. And it's basically a way to avoid nightmare for a graphics engineer. A graphics engineer that has a Substance, he knows that everything's going to be all right. So in the end, PBR is a different way of working, but for the artists, it's actually a much more convenient way and a much less stressful way of creating assets. So the tools to do PBR textures. So we're not the only tool, of course, on the market who can produce PBR textures, but we're the only one who has been built from ground up to support physically based rendering. All the other tools basically have added patchworks or stuff to try to go into this field, but at the very beginning, we thought about PBR and how to produce tools this way. So this is why also we are very much avant-garde, meaning that we could have done PBR 5 years ago if we wanted to, but the market was not ready. Now, Unity 5 supports PBR natively, and it's the right time to actually start using this kind of tool. We're going to talk about Substance Painter, mostly, which is our 3D painter. We like to call it a material painter. We're going to talk briefly about Substance Designer, which is our tool for technical artists to be able to create a PBR pipeline. And finally, Substance Share, our community's free exchange platform that we launched 2 weeks ago. Wes?
Okay, is my mic on? Yeah, all right, guys. My name is Wes. It's awesome to be here today to talk to everybody. And so let's just get started here. And let me just minimize PowerPoint. Show the video. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump over here to Unity and just show you what we're going to talk about first. So we have this scene here, and I'll just press play on this so we can see just a little bit of this animation. Oh, no. Let's see.
You have to duplicate, you know.
Yeah. There we go. All right, so let's try it again. Okay, so I'll hit play, and so here we're just going to see this is the asset we're going to talk about. This model is actually, just want to give a shout out to Michael Pavlovich. He's the artist who created this model. Phenomenal ZBrush artist, phenomenal Substance artist. So thank you very much, Michael. And so like I said, we're going to jump over into Substance Painter, and I'm going to take a look at how we would create some of these materials very quickly. All right, so let's jump over to Painter. And we're going to start with just taking a look at this upper body here. So the first thing I'm going to do here, and I'm going to select my texture set here, format the upper body. And I'm going to start here by first creating a fill layer. And the idea here is that I want to start thinking about this in terms of a metal. So with Substance Painter, we're constantly thinking about materials. So we're thinking about all these channels at one time. Notice here that I have my color. Now color, in the workflow, we're going to be using the Unity standard shader. So the default standard shader is actually using a metal rough workflow. So what we're going to do is think about color as your albedo. And we're also going to use this rough and metal as well. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my materials, and I'm just going to quickly just grab hold of just a preset here to start me off. And so I'm going to grab this uniform titanium. And so as soon as I do this, you can see that here I have all the channels I'm going to be working with here. I just cycle through my channels. Here we see base color or albedo. Now, at this point in time with base color, what we're looking at, since this is a pure metal surface, this value that we see here is the metal reflectance value. So something to keep in mind with metal reflectance for raw metal is that it's going to be highly reflective, and it's going to be about 70 to 100% reflective. So you need this color value to be, fairly bright, as you see here. This color value you see is actually something that you would get from measured data. So again, utilizing preset materials and things like that we provide, you know that you're going to have the precise measured data here to make up this particular metal that we're going to be working with. And so here, if we just zoom in a little close, I've got my roughness, so I can start to interact with my roughness. Roughness with PBR is going to be a very important map. It's going to be your most creative map that you can work with. And as you can see, as we start to increase this roughness, now I'm saying the word roughness. In Unity, we think about this as smoothness. It's actually the same concept. It's describing the microsurface detail of the material. However, Unity just happens to call it smoothness. And so, just know that roughness, smoothness, we're talking about the same thing. And so notice here that, when we keep this roughness here, we keep this at a fairly smooth, we get this more focused, bright highlight. And as we start to increase roughness, we start to spread this out. Gives the appearance that the highlight is becoming more blurry and it's becoming dimmer. However, that's not the case as far as, the energy is. The same amount of light is being reflected. It's just that the light rays that are hitting this surface are being roughed up, so to speak, because of the microsurface detail. It's basically just scattering the rays until we get this type of highlight here. So you can see with Substance Painter, I can just interactively work with this. So instead of having to know all this scientific stuff, I can just be like, oh yeah, that looks good here. This is what I want to work with. So here's our roughness that we have in place thus far. Looks pretty bland as a value. So the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a new fill layer on top of this guy, and I'll start to name these as I go. So here I'm going to turn off a bunch of channels, and I'm only going to enable my roughness channel. And for this, I'm going to use this noise map here. So this is a procedural noise that I'm applying to this. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this projection mode to triplanar. And what that means is Substance Painter is going to project this noise texture in world space, so we won't have to worry about any seams on our mesh. So that's really good. And I'm going to tile this noise up, so you can see that I'm using kind of like this workflow of material layering to kind of build up these details. So I'm going to tile this. So this is kind of getting me in the range that I want, but I'd like to process this grunge map. So here I'm just going to add myself a levels, and I'm going to switch this here to my roughness channel. So now I have my histogram, and I'm going to take my output black and my output white and just make a quick adjustment here. So now you can see here with my roughness, I'll start to move my light around that it's a more of a subtle effect, but it's really starting to kind of break up that light. And this, again, your roughness goes a long way about describing like what I like to refer to as the story of your material. What is the environment this material has been in? What kind of condition is it in? All of this can get explained into your roughness map. So now that I have this in place, I'm going to create myself a new group here. I'm just going to call this, let's make sure we call it metal. I can never type on this thing. All right, metal. And I'm going to grab hold of my metal, and I'm going to place this here into the graph. Into this group. And I'm just going to drag my roughness at the very top. So here we're working with layers, very simple to work with. And for this metal, I'm going to mask this. So I'm going to use this mask with color selection. Now what this is going to do is give me this tool that's going to allow me to use an ID map that was baked here in Painter to place this material on a specific spot on the mesh. So I'll click Pick Color, and I'm going to choose to put the metal in just a few areas here. So you can see I'm picking this blue. We'll pick this value here. And so here I'm just masking where this layer or this metal is going to go. And again, if I want, I can go into my viewer settings here, or actually my texture set settings, bake textures, and we have an integrated baking tool set that ships with Painter and allows me to bake things like my curvature, ambient occlusion, ID, all the type of maps that I'm going to use in this texturing process. So at this point, I now start to have this kind of metal in place that I want to work with. Now, I'm not doing any hand painting at this point because the idea is that I'm wanting to build up this material using kind of more this procedural workflow that you see me working with now. And the idea is that I'm trying to create this material that's going to become a reusable asset for me. That's going to get me about 80% of the way done to texturing my material. Then, on top of that, I go through this polish phase, when I start to take this from 80% to 100% done, where I can start to hand paint things, like especially if you think in terms of the roughness map, where I'm going to go in and add, fine-tuned scratches or fingerprints, things like that are really going to help sell this realistic effect. So next, I need to add some more material on top of this. I'm going to start with just a new group here, and this here is just going to be my paint layer. So we have this metal, and I'm going to have this dielectric paint layer on top of that. So whenever you think of a metal that has paint or rust or even dirt or something on top of that, you need to think of that in terms of a non-metal. Because even though it's paint underneath, it's going to have this dielectric layer on top. So in our case, we have this paint dielectric layer, which means we're no longer going to think of this as a metal at this point. So here, I'm going to add in another fill layer, and I'm just going to use here this uniform plastic. I'm using plastic because I'm working with a dielectric. When we're thinking of this in terms of the metal rough workflow, the reflective F0 value for dielectrics is going to be about 4%. It's kind of a hard-coded value when it comes to metal rough. And so we can work with this very easily. So here I am going to just start to set a roughness. Let's just set a color here for our paint. So I might do something more like this value here. And notice that I have my rough on top. So now, since this is a layer stack, we're processing things from the bottom up. You can see that I have this roughness on top, and it's just propagating down to all the other layers. So what I want to do at this stage here is come in, and I'm just going to add a black mask to this guy. And again, I'm just going to come in and start to use my ID map to place this dielectric on top of where I want this to go on the actual material itself. So in this case, I'm going to choose this red. So as soon as I do that, you can see that we've automatically get this mask. So here we have our raw metal. We have metal on top, a paint on top of that metal that we just placed. And we have this overall roughness that we're using for both the dielectric and the metal. Now, in this case, you would probably want to have your own specific roughness for that metal layer. But in my case, I'm just kind of reusing it on top of both the painted and the raw metal underneath, since technically we're thinking of it as the same material. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my metal layer here, and I'm just going to copy this guy and borrow it. So let's come up to our paint layer, and let's paste this guy in here. And here is my paint. What I'm going to do now is add just a little bit of some damage wear effects, and we can do that really easily. So here I'm just going to add a black mask to this guy, and here I'm going to jump in and add a generator. And I'm going to just scroll down here and just grab this guy here, which is going to be our metal edge wear. And as soon as I apply this, you see that we now have this kind of edge wear effect. We can adjust all this in real time. So I'm just going to pull this up and start to adjust to my contrast here. And my grunge amount, we'll pull this down. So here you can see that I can just interact with this in real time as I go. So here we start to kind of get this material that we're working with. So I'm going to try to just kind of speed things up just a little bit here. And so now that we got these guys in place, we got our roughness here. One thing that I might add on top of this guy, let's just pull here kind of a dirt layer. So what I'm going to do is just turn off my height. Just really quick, I am going to choose here just kind of a brownish, kind of darker value like this. And make sure this guy is rough. And here I'm going to mask this guy as well, and I'm just going to utilize one of our substance generators just to kind of put some of this dirt on top of this guy. So like I said, I'm using this kind of layering to kind of get me, about 80% of the way done to this. So now that I have all this in place, what I'm going to do is just kind of group everything together. So here, let me just grab all the layers that I've been working with, and I'm just going to group them here into this folder. And I'm going to call this Demo. And what I'd like to do is take all this work I've done thus far and apply this here to the head. So here I'm just going to right-click, and I'm going to create a smart material out of this. And so if I come over here to my smart materials, and let me just do a quick filter for that. So here's Demo. Let's jump over here to our head. And now I can take this smart material, and I can just simply drag and drop this here into the texture set for the head. And Substance Painter is going to texture this for me. You can see that it's processing it. Magic. And here we go. Boom, I'm done texturing. And so you can see that is why I started at that beginning to kind of build through this material, kind of with this material layering kind of procedural workflow. So now you can see that it was easy. One of the things that we can do with these smart materials is that every single one of these layers that I worked on, if you look at this, you can see they're all exposed to me. Nothing is collapsed. Nothing is compiled down to a single layer. I can go back and edit every single thing that I did from each generator, each mask I created, everything.
Particles and metal implants.
Yep.
Substance design.
All right, so next we'll jump back over here to the upper body. And let's say that I'm kind of going to move into some more of this kind of finishing stage here. So now that I have kind of that smart material I've been working with, I'm going to add a new layer to this guy. And I'm going to start to do some hand painting to this. So I've added a standard layer to this guy. And here I'm just going to come over to my particles, and I'm going to grab this leaks effect, and I'm going to change my material. So for the color, let's just make this kind of like a darker value. Let's turn off my height and make this pretty rough. And here I have my metal. Now, notice here again, I'm working with all these channels at the same time as I work. So here I'm adding this kind of leaks effect. This is, you know, I want this to be pretty rough. But notice here for my base color, this is my albedo value. I want to make sure that I pick a value that's not too dark. So one of the things that you want to think about in terms of PBR, when you're looking at that albedo color value, you want to keep that within a specific range. If we think about that as sRGB, I would say you probably want to keep this, don't go below 30 sRGB, don't go above 245 sRGB as far as your lights go. So you want to keep this within a range. You don't want to have this set all the way down to 0 black, because nothing in the real world is actually going to be black. Even something that's very dark like coal, it's not going to be just black. So now that we have this in place, I'll come over here to my actual particles, and I can start to paint these guys in. So here we go. So now I can actually run kind of this physical simulation here to kind of start to add some more of this effect. So I'm just changing my brush size, and I'm just kind of using this, you know, just really quick just to kind of add some variation to this or organically as I go. And like I said, all the painting tools that you would expect in a painting application are present, so we could use those as well. So another thing that we have with this that I want to show that's really powerful, I'm going to jump over to the actual arm. And so since this is Substance Painter, we can actually paint with substance materials.
So this is actually a nice transition for Substance Designer. What Wes is going to use now is what we call the parametric brush. So basically, he's going to do a metal implant, and go for it.
Okay, let me just get my...
And when the brush collides with the mesh, it actually creates wounds depending on the matter it's colliding with. So it's a little bit gruesome, but basically here this is true parametric painting. So the wounds are created with the procedural textures that are calculated in the background, and this is where Substance Engine is really unique, meaning that you can create this kind of effects in real time directly by painting on your geometry.
And so once I kind of have this in place, what I'm going to do is I could just come right over here to my export textures, and I'm going to export all the textures that I made. And we actually have presets here for Unity 5. So in our case, we kind of worked, I'm going to be working with the standard default shader in Unity. So that's going to be my metallic workflow, which I've been using. So I'm going to choose this. And I just export the textures. And then once we jump back over to Unity, you can see here is where I have my material. And then I can just drag and drop the textures that are generated. So for instance, the metallic, which is going to have the smoothness in the alpha channel, that Substance Painter preset is going to place or pack those channels appropriately. So it's really a matter of you just simply dragging and dropping these materials in and getting the material set up within Unity.
And as it was mentioned in the keynote this morning, we've been working closely with Unity to make sure we had parity between our Substance Painter viewport and Unity 5.
And so another aspect of this is the actual environment. So the environment is all procedural as well. It's created with Substance Designer. So for instance, if I come over here to this procedural material that I created for this environment, I've gave myself some attributes. So here you can see that I've got things like my puddles. So if I want to just take these puddles and just remove them completely, I can do that here by just adjusting my sliders. So now the puddles are gone. I've even have the way the height map is being generated to create these rocks. I can actually change the shape of these rocks, so I can get different effects or different rock patterns as I apply this to different materials and so on. And so, like I said, with this, we've got this true procedural generated texture that's also generating complete PBR maps. So if we take a look at Substance Designer itself and how this was created, so here in Substance Designer, we put this together. Substance Designer is a node-based, but we're using the same principles that we used in Painter, where we're just layering materials. So for instance, I have like my rocks, I have my ground dirt, I'm just blending these materials together. You can see that here, if I expose all my channels, I'm working with base color, normal, roughness, and so on. The same exact PBR channels, except they're all compiled down into a single entity as I work. So I can go through and create this effect. I can expose values like, for instance, the puddles, rock shade, color, add dirt, snow, whatever type of generation that I want to create. And I can expose those parameters that are then going to be used inside of Unity. So another thing that Alex had mentioned at the beginning of our talk was that we've created this sharing site for the Substance community. And it's very powerful in that, you can be working here in our tools. You can come up with something that you have yourself, and you can say, you know what, this worked out really well for me. I'm going to share it with my Substance community. Or you can be looking for a Substance. You could say, I'd really like to get, this rock. So for instance, I did this, I shared it to the Substance community. So if I just jump over here to my browser, you can see that I can log into Substance Share. And I can go and just take a look at the different files. So here you can see that we've got, and I don't think I'm still connected to the internet, but I can run in and I can get things like materials, images, filter effects, meshes, shaders, brushes, alphas, whatever you can think of.
Can you show the brushes, for instance?
I don't think it's.
Oh, okay, it's not connected.
Let me connect right now.
So we launched Substance Share less than a week ago. And we already have more than 25,000 downloads and more than 3,000 users, actually. And it's completely free, and it will remain free. And it's under Creative Commons license, meaning that you can do whatever you want with the content that's in there, for commercial use, non-commercial use, training, whatever you want. So this was an initiative we started 6 months ago. And honestly, go there, pick anything you want. It's it's a very, very it's a very worthy database for content, shaders, brush, smart materials, and so on.
Yeah, it's working now.
Yeah.
All right, so for instance, here's the rocky ground dirt that I had worked on, and I was like, oh, this is good. I think I'll share it with the community. So let's say that you're out looking for something like this. You can download the file. Since you have the integration native with Unity, take that material, just drag and drop it right into your project, apply the material, and there you go. You have a fully procedural PBR material ready to rock in your Unity project.
Great. Thank you, Wes. Can you put the PowerPoint back?
Yes.
Just the last slide. Okay, just before we will have like a few minutes for questions. The other good news I would say is that everything you've seen here, Substance Painter, Substance Designer, Substance Share, of course, is available at a very friendly price. It costs $19 per month as soon as you're compliant with Indie. Indie means less than 100K of revenue per year. It's not a subscription, meaning that you can start and pause. And actually, it's a rent to own, meaning that after 16 months, you own the product, meaning that you never lose, basically, any money here. So we are the only company who is doing this system, and it's really to create a community and give access to the fully featured technology for as many people as possible. That's pretty much it. So thank you. So it was pretty short. We already had 25 minutes to present all that, so sorry if it was quick. We have a few minutes for questions, actually.
Hi. I love using Painter, and I've just started using Designer, and love the ability to expose the properties. One thing I was wondering, though, you can't animate those properties in Unity. Is that ever going to be possible, or is that no?
You mean for Substance Material?
Substance Material, like if I expose the properties up, I can't access them through the... I can't keyframe them.
So the question is, can I animate substances inside Unity? And the answer is actually yes. So it should work. So perhaps we can talk about it later.
I'll swing by and talk to you about it later.
Right.
I guess my question might have been related to the same thing. Essentially, are all the parameters available for scriptable?
So the question is, are all substance parameters available for scripting? Yes. So you can consider it as a feature from Unity. So you can animate any substance parameter, the cracks, the dirt, the colors, at runtime inside Unity.
It's part of the procedural material API if you look up in the scripting docs in Unity.
One more question? Sure.
Are there any other native integrations other than Unity?
So question about native integration, yes. So we're natively inside Unity. Our friends from Epic as well, UE4, but also in Maya, Max, Modo, Houdini, Cinema 4D, and other smaller tools. But basically, we're almost everywhere. The one coming soon is Lightwave. This is probably the only mainstream tool that we're not integrated with. Yes?
I have a question about the
So the question, if you should repeat the question, actually.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, the question is, the ID mask, how is that created? And so it can be created a couple different ways. The easiest way is in your 3D program, you have a bunch of materials. You just apply those materials to the mesh. Whatever color those materials have, when you do a bake and you say bake, you can actually choose the material color. It will bake that map into a texture using whatever materials you set. Or you could have painted that using vertex color. A good example of that is if you use ZBrush and you have poly paint, you paint a bunch of vertex information, you can bake the vertex color as the map as well.
But that's not based on the UV layout?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because whatever the UV, it's basically taking the color of the material or the vertex color and flooding the UV shells with that color.
Just one note about the bakers. We've been working on the bakers for like 3.5 years now. It's a very solid baking solution. So it's really competitive, meaning that in theory you don't need any other tool for all the baking aspect of things. And it's used by major AAA studios in replacement of XNormal, for instance. Any other questions? I think we're out of time anyways. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.